Let's start the harvest, says a young man to two women who are pretty eager to get started. Looks like our manga is getting right to it from the get-go. One of the girls, who seems to be quite the eye-pleaser, is happy that Hashira, who is our protagonist for this manga, has come into their lives and has enriched it. Hashira, being the most humble gigachad that we have seen so far, doesn't like taking all of the credit, but instead appreciates everyone for their combined efforts, especially the plant god whose blessings have made everything possible. Let's get some backstory too. The merry, happy life must have some type of a dark past. And there you have it. Hashira had actually died in the real world, but was reincarnated by the goddess of plants, Elifura. Elifura greets Hashira, who is still in shock over where he is and what the hell even happened to him just now. She sweetly tells him to calm down and follow her as she leads him towards an open grassy land, where the roots from the ground come up and create wooden chairs and a table. This is some real wacky stuff, and Hashira needs time to process, but that processing can wait since Aras, the god who oversees whatever happens on Earth, has arrived. He scolds Elifura to not go around messing things up, but after seeing her give him the puppy dog eyes, he lets it pass. Elifura introduces Aras and Hashira to each other and explains how they now stand in the domain where the gods reside, and that she had requested Aras to temporarily bring Hashira to her. Still a bit confused, Aras wipes that confusion away, but clearing the fact that Hashira is at this very moment dead. This shouldn't be hard to realize, but turns out our protagonist has the brain of a 3-year-old. Hashira has been working to the bone for almost all of his life. Being the eldest son, the responsibilities that were thrown upon him were immense. This led him to eventually fall and die on the spot on his way back from work. Apparently his shoe also came off, which makes zero sense as to how that even happened. Normally, he would have been reformed into something new after death, but Elfura had a keen eye for him. Whoa there, god of hotness and plants, we believe this is taking a bit too far. Anyways, the reason behind this is because Hashira, when he was nothing but a little boy, had repaired a rundown shrine near his grandparents' home. That shrine turned out to be of Elifura's, and thus what was once an unknown and almost broken down shrine later became a place of worship for many people, and the faith had returned. Now that he's dead, Elifura sees this as a win-win situation. Wait, hold up lady, you waited all this time for our man to die? This seems sus. Elifura claps her hands in delight and remarks how she plans to have Hashira reborn into another world where the culture and people are different from that of Earth. Arus clarifies that it isn't really reincarnation, but rather transmigration. However, if he refuses this offer, his soul will vanish and an entirely new soul shall be placed into his body. Elifura holds Hashira's hand and later even hugs him, telling him how she wishes for him to live a peaceful life, which he can truly enjoy since his previous one was horrible. This makes Hashira bawl like a little baby, but he later gets a hold of himself and uses his gigachad personality. He then agrees to be transmigrated into this new world and requests that he shall be kept in the countryside, surrounded by nature. This being Elifura's specialty, she takes the reins and with the help of Aras, they give him one last gift. A staff that is a divine instrument to help control the power of the blessings, and like that, he is transmigrated into another world. Hashira wakes up, rubbing his head as if he was thrown from heaven instead of transmigrated. He looks around and is surrounded by enormous trees, the type of which he has never seen before. He touches his body and it seems that nothing has changed about it, except for his clothes, which have been changed into something that fit this new world. Feeling hopeless at first after witnessing the new place he has been thrown into, he calms himself down and starts to feel power wheeling inside of him. He takes out his staff and with its help, he converts the trees into a house that is similar to the one of his grandparents. Very tacky from Hashira. Our man is quick to catch on and adapt to his new surroundings. He enters the house and can feel nostalgia hitting real hard. Next up is setting up a good washroom system, and for that, Hashira explores the forest for a river where he can connect the water supply to his house. While exploring the forest, he finds some fruits and vegetables that surprisingly he knows at once where they are and what type of benefits they bring to his body. This is all thanks to the blessings that were given to him by the gods. He finds the water source, or a huge river, which is clearer than the one in his home planet. If only he had a fishing line, he would be munching on some fish tenders by now. He knows he lacks some important equipment, but all of that can be arranged over time. He hears some rustling from behind a bush, and upon investigating, he discovers a single-horned deer that looks very similar to a unicorn. Hashira really craves some good meat right now. He hasn't considered turning into a vegan, and so he uses his staff to capture the deer on the spot. The process after that is widely censored for our young-aged viewers, even me. After all of this, Hashira is glad that he can live such a life, free of any type of deadlines, going to work at 8 AM and coming back late at night. He is the boss of this new place and he feels so much more in control. He stares out in the horizon and a bright smile is on his face. Living in this world has been nothing but survival, but thanks to help from the gods, he is glad that things have worked out so far. The sun seems to be tilting the other way around, which means it is time for our protagonist to head back home and get ready for the next day, which would probably be a lot more difficult than the current one. Hashira seems to be in full concentration while carrying out this certain task. His face has taken up a weird type of expression, as if he's going through child labor. He now lays down next to his failed attempt at creating a fire. He recalls how his grandfather made it look so easy whenever he did it. He hasn't done it before, which is why it has become an annoying task to create fire. The base is also wobbly, which was added to the problem. Back at school, he did learn to create fire, but he can't remember all the details. Out of nowhere, he gets an idea. What if there were 2 more pairs of hands? Then creating the fire would be a piece of cake. Hashira grabs his head, a bit alarmed at how this unknown voice just brought an idea into his mind. After this, out of the ground comes a huge tree-like figure. The tree offers to help Hashira, who hands him the stick to hold steadily while he spins the stick to create a fire. It's amazing how the smoke is slowly coming out. He then gets down to blow on the board, and just like that, a flame has been created. Thanks to this huge scary tree, he now has some light and warmth to last the night. But this scary tree seems to be scared instead. It's because of the fire, and rightly so. It can get burned alive because of it. With the fire problem out of the way, it is time to make dinner. With the vegetables and fruits that Hashira collected while exploring the forests, he can now cook up something pretty good for himself. Amaguri chestnuts, pink cherries, and mozal are the few items that we get to know about. Amaguri chestnuts are supposed to be peeled and eaten, similar to the way you peel and eat a sugarcane. The pink cherries resemble a Sakura NBO and look quite appetizing. He wishes to boil the vegetables, but no bowl or pot in sight. Bro literally can create a whole house out of nothing, but struggles to come up with an idea on how to boil vegetables without a pot. Top 10 most dumbest moments in manga history. Out of nowhere, our so-called genius main character gets the idea to create pans and pots out of stone using his divine staff. But the idea of putting in so much effort seems tiring, and he decides otherwise. Filling his stomach with fruits, aka the cherries, he makes use of the tree leaves as a futon, and after bidding the golem goodnight, he falls into deep slumber. The next morning he wakes up, stretches a bit, and is ready to get as much as possible done today. Mr. Golem sits in a corner watching our hero make the day's schedule. He has to stock up on food, catch another unicorn deer for that added protein since he probably skips leg day, and most importantly, has to create pots and pans to cook decent meals. With this very important list in mind, Hashira does the most important and vital task among them, and that is planting gravaringo and pink cherry seeds. My man dismisses every important task and gets down to farming. Brilliance ends with this one here. And thus, he creates a square-like fence around his garden and gets down to hoeing the field so that he can plant the seeds and pray that they turn out to grow as fast as possible. The golem has arrived and points towards itself to lend a helping hand to him. Hashira is not shy to put the golem to some unpaid labor and hands him a hoe to work on the other side. And that is how, my friends, slavery is born. Noon has arrived, and with it follows the sweat, which Hashira wipes from his forehead. All this work on the field has really made him sweat buckets. He plants the seed and with the help of the golem, goes out to fetch buckets of water to sprinkle on them. He stands over the field, seeing that the seeds aren't growing any faster, and so he makes use of his blessings. He shoots the beams of light over the field, and voila! The seeds have grown into plants and have formed perfect trees. He does observe the soil to be negatively affected by the powers, and makes a point in his mind to not use them religiously. But then again, these points aren't going to stay too long in his already empty skull. Hashira takes a short break and ponders over how his family is going by without him in this previous world. He can't do anything now, but their resemblance still stays strong in his mind. Clapping his face with both of his hands, he snaps back into reality and takes the golem into the forest to hunt some deer and get new crops to grow. Better to do something progressive than to sit around thinking about the past. As they walk down the muddy, uneven forest floor, Hashira realizes how lame it is to keep calling on his new woody friend Golem. He then comes up with some lame suggestions such as Kotaro, which the golem dislikes and bonks him on the forehead. Hashira nurses his forehead and tries to think of another unique name that will really make his friend stand out. Ah yes, he asks if Rent is the type of name that his new friend would like. The golem thinks for a good minute and agrees with Hashira. Yeah, sure, call your new friend Rent, since he probably isn't paying a single penny to stay at your mansion. And just like that, Hashira and his newly named tree friend Rent wander in the forest to catch some unicorn deer and find new crops to grow on his farm. Hashira is quite the enthusiast here. He tells Rent to get him a stone so he can carve it into something. With the stone now in front of him, he transforms his special staff into a knife and starts to cut it. Boy, does the knife work like a sword. It cuts through the rock like it's some tofu or something. This can be dangerous for our very clumsy Hashira, and he tells himself to be wary of this sword, otherwise he could have his hand cut in half or two. Rent has arrived with a whole lot of blocks on his back, and our unpaid worker gets a thumbs up from Hashira, who has only succeeded in cutting a stone in half. We mustn't go around roasting our main man, since now he ventures further in front and finds a tree that has some type of fruit hanging from its branches. He picks one of them, and his knowledge enlightens him that it is an oligo that contains oil in its interior. He can crush and mix the oil with water to separate it. Happiness shines from his eyes since he recognizes his fruit as the olive from his world. He is overjoyed, since now he can cook something great with this oil. The voice in his head tells him to look around, and voila, he discovers yomogi, udo, uri, and fuki. All these plants and crops are not available in his world, but at least he can boil these vegetables and make something good out of them. Thank God his divine powers are working as a charm. Using a bucket, he collects a few of the vegetables and fruits to cook at home. The rest he shall just collect the seeds of and grow on his farm. He can now make the perfect dish. However, the lack of condiments would give the dish a particular taste, but then again, you don't always get what you wish for. Rent has arrived carrying more wood and blocks. He motions to Hashira if they should head back, and so they do. Back at home, Hashira uses his divine staff and concentrates all his energy into it. He uses his imagination and creates a huge shed, which he calls the butchering shed. Rent carries the unicorn deer into the shed and places it on the table. Hashira gets to work and starts to skin the animal and remove the organs and separate the meat as well. Thanks to Rent being here for him, the work is done quite quickly. But the meat is a bit too much for him to eat in one night, and he tries to think of a way to preserve it. The leaves wouldn't be of any help since it would decompose the meat in a matter of hours. If only they had a cellar that they could store all the meat in one place and not be worried of it getting spoiled. As if a revelation from God has entered his mind, he gets the idea to create a cellar underneath the shed. To this, he tells Rent, our very handy-dandy worker, to create a cellar underground. Giving the mouthless tree all the hard work, Hashira leaves to plant some more seeds. He uses his hands to create holes in the ground and nimbly places the seeds in them, after which he tucks them in and kisses them goodnight. Water is poured over the soil, after which Hashira presses the soil base gently with his hands before finally removing the plant that has grown thanks to his magic. He removes the root ball without breaking it and places the seedling in the hole. He pours more water gently around the base, and for the final act, he slams his hands on the soil and uses growth promotion technique. This gives the plants the ability to grow nice and smooth and faster than the average growth time. With 8 different varieties now planted, Hashira feels satisfied with his work and efforts. The farm has already become cramped up, and he plans to expand it further in front. Our hard worker pays a visit to Rent, who seems to be leaving the shed. He asks if the cellar has been made, and Rent, looking quite pleased with himself, points underground. Hashira visits the cellar and is astounded at the final work of his new friend. Rent has done quite the work down here. He could even feel the coldness as well, and knows this place is perfect for the unicorn deer meat. The reinforcements are solid, and the only thing missing are the shelves, which he can do in a jiffy by using his staff. The shelves are made, and finally the meat is placed in a safe storage. All the things that Hashira had listed down seems to be going smoothly, which leaves our main work, and that is the menu. He places the meat on the kitchen board and gets down to seasoning without salt. Yes, there isn't any salt discovered yet by him, so he must use what he has. The oligo fruit is roasted on the stove, but the hard shell hasn't broken down. He lacks any device that can help him crush the hard exterior and starts to ponder on any way to break it down and take out the oil. He looks at Rent, who holds the fruit and gives him the chance to break it down. Rent busies himself with squeezing the oil out in a bowl while Hashira checks the stone pot out. The water is boiling, not as fast as he wanted, since the stone isn't the best conductor of heat, but it's doing its job. The vegetables are on the plate and he checks each item out. Fuki needs to be rubbed with salt and then boiled in water. Zenmai needs baking soda for bitterness removal, but that's a lot of work to create all these items, which he doesn't have with him. He then chooses the Onoko and Tohigo, which he picked on the first day. Rent gives him the bowl with the crushed oil out, and Chef Hashira starts on the unicorn deer meat. He places the meat in the sizzling pot and adds the oil. The aroma in the room has started to make him feel hungry as well. Controlling the heat with the flames is difficult, since this is no modern-style electric stove, but alas, he succeeds in cooking the meat and places it on a wooden slab. He rubs his hands together, getting ready to chow down on his food, but looks over at Rent, who is staring at him with hungry eyes. Hashira fetches him a bucket of water for his tree friends to place his feet in and absorb the water. Very innovative indeed. Hashira takes the first bite of the meat and has drool sprinkled down from it. He also tastes the vegetables, which he comments on needing some alcohol to add flavor. Hashira has become quite the Gordon Ramsay, and has forgotten that he is literally in another world and not some master chef. After finishing his meal, he smiles a satisfied smile. This doesn't feel like farming, but more like a survival life. Nonetheless, he is glad that he is living such a good life.